Kia ora. This is a presentation on the tips to developing an alternative housing community that could save you time and money. I'm Zola Rose, and this is a presentation by Common Ground, a social enterprise dedicated to enabling more connected, affordable, and sustainable housing communities. I've created a PowerPoint presentation, so we'll start with that. So tips for developing an alternative housing community and also creating regeneration. So Common Ground works with a regenerative perspective or regenerative systems. And this is what I promote, which is the inclusion of regenerative systems with collective and personal leadership systems with built-in structural systems, all being guided about through the regenerative thinking and design. So we're going to start with this part of the regenerative systems thinking, which includes the economy, culture, ecology, and social. So just to better understand the definition of regenerative development, it's about seizing the potential born of crisis for transforming our role as designers, planners, builders, and citizens. It's enabling the places where we live and work to thrive. It works on potential in a way that creates greater vitality. It's designing a built environment and human systems that can co-evolve with natural systems. It works to create fields of caring and commitment among stakeholders, enables people to understand themselves and the places where they live as complex, evolving living systems, and then builds the political will and the systemic thinking capabilities required to design and create new ways of living in harmony with those living systems. So this cuts across those four pillars that I had mentioned: the cultural, the social, the economic, and the ecology. So when we think about regenerative development, we start with ourselves. We are the practitioner, the project leader. We are working within the project. So in the case of a housing community, it would be the land on which the housing would be developed. And then we've got the proximate whole, which is that community in which that we are building. It could be the town or the city, it could be the larger neighborhood. And then we've got the greater whole. And that greater whole could be as large as the whole entire earth, or it could just be maybe the country that we're living in. And that's where we're going to be tying in what we do with what we're doing with the project and how the project is affecting and is affected by its proximate area, and then is affecting and is affected by that whole. And we keep those systems in mind as we're developing the goals and seeing the potential that our project has for good. We also talk about guilds and nodes in terms of the fact that we're not working in isolation. We are in relationship and have the potential to, again, make a positive difference on other entities, as well as having those entities really positively contribute to our housing community. So in terms of a guild and maybe a typical town where you might think of developing relationships and collaboration, where you might see there's a need to be served, or where there's a possibility to create better synergies, you might look, is there anything in the local school where families could benefit from living in the housing community? Or those living in the housing community might be serving the local school as teachers or in some other capacity. It may be is that the school is having an outdoor classroom experience once a month in the housing community. So there's a lot of potential to be explored just by looking at that other entity of schools. Then we might look at where the food from that housing community comes from or goes to, depending on the size of the housing community. It could both serve as a food producer, but obviously it would need to buy in some, and where would that be from, and what kind of partnership could that look like? We need to look at the community members. So who is the housing community serving, and what community members might like to live there? It might be that you have settled refugees in your community. Could the housing community benefit these refugees in some way, or future residents? And there might be unemployed. Maybe the housing community has micro enterprise, where there might be some opportunities to create employment. And then we have other local organizations which have all kinds of missions that could either help to serve the housing community or vice versa. So you can see there's a lot of exploring of potential when we look at our proximate whole and creating a strong guild. And we also want to think about the fact that we talk about saving time and money, and yet there are other capitals that we need to consider when we are doing a regenerative approach. So that financial piece is quite often we do think about housing as an investment. What are we going to get when we finally leave and we sell the house? Or we might use it as equity to be able to purchase something else. And that's wonderful to get financial equity or financial value. But if you're wanting something else, if you want maybe a non-speculative housing community, you want it to be more affordable, maybe you want to work with a land trust which caps resale, then you need to look at other ways that your housing community is going to be building capital. So if you've capped or the financial is limited, well, we can look at the built environment, being if we're using natural building and ecological building techniques, we might really be creating something that is of beauty and of great benefit for generations to come. I know housing here in this country was built so badly that it's created a great problem for the residents who are living in those homes. So how do we create a built environment that adds value to our, again, our proximate whole? The natural capital would be things like the plants and the water, those other living systems, and how can we add value to the living systems around us? Are we planting food, growing food, biodiversity? Are we helping to create natural, cleaner water systems, power, not using fossil fuels? We have our social cultural capital, which is the connected way of living, and the cultural appropriateness of the houses in the community, the systems in which we are creating, which honor cultural traditions. And that is a really strong one for people who want to live in intentional community. It's really can create, I know for older communities, that social then could keep them out of an old age home where they're able to age in place. For single mothers, it could be that they have a wider family network than they would have otherwise. And then this human capacity is the skills that are developed both in the process of creating community, that capacity to be able to learn soft skills and hard skills, and then the human capacity that is built ongoing by the community itself. And so we can really look at how we're developing multiple facets of capital, and we can speak to that as a positive that our community brings. Now, so regenerative thinking, when we are looking at saving time and money, these are the kinds of things and the way we want to frame our housing community to others as we're building it and need to attract finance and other stakeholders. So we want to create a narrative of regenerative placemaking, and those are the things that we've talked about previously. There are tools that can be used. So the Global Ecovillage Network has a set of design principles, and they also have cards that can be used in a more participatory workshop where we explore the areas of the regenerative potential of our housing community. We also want to look at what problems does our housing community solve for the proximate and wider whole, and we can speak to that as well as those organizations from the guild that we might be able to partner and be able to share resources. And that goes into the other entities and organizations. What are they caring to solve? How could we work together? And what local goals do maybe it's our municipalities have, where our community helps our local council or municipality to reach some of their goals. Maybe it's local economic development, maybe it's ending gentrification. Continuing on, what resources can be allocated and channeled through those relationships, and to look at what precedent might be set either in the country or in other countries that we can learn from, where risk has been mitigated, because that's also quite the difficult piece around getting financial investment is around risk. So if we can look at where other communities have mitigated that, we can take that case study and use it for our own project. And then we also want to look at creating small wins. We might have a really big idea for something that we want to create. Maybe it's 30 or 60 or 100 homes. And yet we do need to start with getting some small wins where we build confidence in the relationships. And we can look at phasing in our project. Maybe we just start with phase one. We see how that goes. We have a master plan that we're working towards, but we really just work on that phase one and before we're able to get more capital. Second piece of the system we're looking at is the built and structural systems. So this is a lot of bits and pieces to look at. We've got when we want to develop on land, consenting, and we've got the legal for having security of tenure. And we've got the waste and water to consider, and power, energy. We've got our roading and land use design, which would be done first to figure out where we're going to put everything, and architecture, structural construction. There's a lot of bits and pieces in here that we want to really look at. Again, if we're taking a regenerative systems thinking approach, a lot of this would look very different than it would be in the conventional style of developing. So we want to look at our master plan. What can we do in stages? I have put two examples here where ecovillage at Ithaca, they have 3 different neighborhoods. So they started with 1 and then they built the other 2 after that. And Takaka co-housing has the same approach, where they now have about 100, or they will have 100, phasing in at about 33 with each neighborhood. We want to look at a legal entity that can steward land and develop the project. And if it's going to receive donation grants and funding, it would need to be some sort of a trust or a nonprofit charity. Even a cooperative can sometimes receive funding because it is non-speculative. So these are the legal entities we want to check out for the greatest amount of being able to harness any funding that might be available. And there's lots of opportunity using a shared equity model for housing. There's a few different ways of doing shared equity. For instance, there's one which is a rent to buy, which is an entity owns it outright, where the people stay in it, are renting, and that goes towards the buy price, or it could just be a straight co-owned equity. And then we also have affordability through shared resources that are on site in the community, and even having on-site livelihood, where you have people not having to leave their homes to make a living. And also in terms of built-in structural systems, we can look at where can we, using again the regenerative framework, where can we attract funding? Could it be in the feasibility stage? Could it be looking at the conservation and ecological aspects? Or if it's an eco-village, it might have opportunity for agriculture, community-supported agriculture. We have opportunities to pilot innovative wastewater and power systems, and would there be enterprises who would like to use this land or this community to be able to showcase what it can do? And educational partnerships are really fantastic. I mentioned the school earlier, but maybe there's a university where students might like to do their research, or the university really might like to perhaps have a hub there at the community in the future. Lots of interesting potential. Ecovillage at Ithaca does have a strong tie to the local university, and that has really helped it to progress over the years with the research that has been produced. And then we have what government policies exist and what could we advocate for? For instance, there is recently our Housing and Urban Development created a policy statement that included collective housing, recognizing that community-led housing is something that really needs to be supported. And so when we see something like that, we can then appeal to our local and central government to receive some funding that would then create capacity for groups to be able to provide their own housing. And then we've got the overall living systems framework for ongoing affordability. Again, this is in the design of the site. There are challenges like in New Zealand, we've got the green star. I think it's called the Green Star. And then we also have the living building challenge. So there's different frameworks that can be used, which help us to have a checklist of what we're going to be achieving. And then we are able to maybe get some investment based on what we're able, the objectives we're achieving. And then to draw attention to permaculture design principles that also would be able to save money and time. And again, a lot of this is seen in the longer term. Sometimes there is a little bit more upfront, but when we're looking at the long term, it definitely is saving because we're importing less and being able to create more systems, self-sufficiency on a site. So going back to the last point, which is collective and personal leadership systems, and again, saving time and money, and how does it do that? We're going to look at collective leadership. So when you're doing connected living, collective housing, intentional community, any of these things, we are working rather than buying a house as an individual. We're looking at doing it as a group. So we really need to look at what toxic culture systems that we don't want to include in our community and being able to get knowledgeable and skilled in cooperative culture. We need to develop a strong core group which has a strong vision and values, which keep us going in the right direction. And the way we do that is by regularly holding gatherings and workshops with interested project participants, maybe future residents in the wider community, where we can practice and explore these skills way before we even get anything built. It's just a way of building community, and that's going to hold us in good stead no matter what happens. We want to continue cultivating relationships with our proximate and wider wholes. We want to create also systems of remuneration and tracking systems for work that is done, because quite often in the beginning, there is a heavier load carried by the initiators of a project. Some people who are privileged maybe have a bit more time or a bit more skill, and so they carry a bit more of that weight. We really want to be able to remunerate or at least track and acknowledge those people that are holding a lot of that responsibility and taking time, and whether they get shares in the project or whether they're just able to step out as the community goes into living in residential. Maybe that is shifting a little bit. That it's also a power related thing, power and rank, but we also need to be able to recognize when time is money that people are putting their energy in to begin with, and so we don't have resentment. And then really what we want to do is have as least done by volunteers in that construction phase. We really want to move it into a professional team to take on the logistics and the development work, because that really is a professional level of being, and they can do that much more efficiently. So we're possible to bring on a team earlier rather than later. And then for people who feel themselves as holding the flame and the vision and taking on a more leadership, really a mastermind is going to give the support and the structure that a leader needs, because it is actually very hard work in the beginning, particularly when one is pioneering. There's a lot of challenges and unknowns, and a mastermind is very helpful for those people to not feel alone. And what it does is it creates deep and lasting connections with incredible people who are in that mastermind group. It's a way to challenge yourself and have accountability. The mastermind is a time for brainstorming and also to get focus and clarity on one's mission, to get support when there are challenges, and it really does help with better decision making, because as we might know, more heads are better than one. It can also help increase confidence. Sometimes when you have more clarity, then you get more confidence. And also feedback creates more confidence. It can save money or find money because other people in your group might have connections that you don't have. You can discover new business partners and cross promotion, where you're each taking a little bit of each other's projects to heart and promoting. You can think bigger and harness potential that you didn't have or see otherwise. You can expand your own skills, learning from others in the group, and help others with your own skills. So I'm going to stop this presentation and go on to a little bit more about that mastermind. Kia ora, I'm going to share about the Common Ground Housing Community Creator Accelerator and Mastermind program, so that you have an understanding. And if you have any questions, then you can email me, or I have a survey that you could fill out, and you can talk about the questions that you have and what would make it work for you. So I'm going to do a share screen to move to the presentation. Okay, the Housing Community Creator Accelerator and Mastermind program. That's me, I'm the one running the program. And about it. So it's for those who see housing as a means for regenerative placemaking, for creating places to live that honor relationship and connection to people and the larger web of existence. There are common challenges faced by people and project leaders that this program addresses. Folks feeling alone or isolated on this big mission, a bit confused by the financial, legal, and development processes, and who could technically be on their team, attracting the right residents, key stakeholders, and investors, and finding the right sympathetic allies willing to work on a risky project. Knowing that advocacy is needed for collective, community-led, and non-speculative housing, but feeling overwhelmed or too insignificant to do advocacy on one's own. and struggling to achieve affordability when costs are so high for experts, materials, consenting, and land. Who is the program designed to serve? Innovative housing and intentional community visionaries stepping into collective housing and community development. Those wishing to live in collective housing, who want to make it happen for themselves. Landowners who want to develop a community on their land. Members of a group exploring housing options. Not-for-profit organization staff looking into creating community-focused housing for their beneficiaries and clients. The kinds of housing, what might be called collective housing or community-led housing or intentional community that the program participants might be creating could include ecovillage, pocket neighborhood, cooperative housing, tiny home village, co-housing, papakainga, co-living, or other collective housing models. The program would include a facilitated group sharing and discussion forum meeting regularly, facilitated group resourcing, a hot seat for each participant and their project. That's really where we drill down into your specific needs and you get all that group support. Accountability mechanisms, progress on your goals, and systems of reflection. The program will run through the Common Ground membership platform, making it easy to find all the resources and communications in one place, customized for the program. One-on-one coaching time, if you would like, for each participant's project. Optional coaching or meetings with Housing and Service to Life Consortium experts and those that are leading the modules. We'll cover those skills and topics around regenerative placemaking, regenerative systems, collective personal leadership systems, and built-in structural systems. And we do this in the form of modules. So in return, this program will invest in you, support and guidance from me, Zola, and members of your group, accountability, traction, and progress on your goals, clarity and confidence to succeed in being a project creator and leader, wider and stronger networks with a range of stakeholders, deepened relationships with others on a similar journey, inspiration with many case studies of successful projects, a better defined roadmap and milestones, bigger regenerative impact identified for social, cultural, ecological, and economic benefits for your project in the wider area, potential increased investment and funding in your project, increased competence to facilitate a housing community's development in partnership with a skilled team. And the elective modules. These are curated presentations and workshops by local practitioners and experts in their field of housing development, catered to participant needs and interests. And you can choose to have them as a package as part of the program or individually. So some of the topics that we have to look at are quite wide, looking at legal, values, financial, community-led aspects, regulation, design, feasibility, and partnerships. But we have put those into 6 modules. So you can get regenerative design and systems for housing and positive impact. You can get permaculture design for land use and master planning. Legal structures for affordability, finance, and funding possibilities. The development process, working with consultants and the construction phase. Social and cultural systems for collective living and management. And project leadership, site choice, marketing, attracting, and advocating. So in order to register your interest for the program, you can go to commonground.net.nz, and there is a button on the home page that will take you to the program page. You can see all of that again and put in your expression of interest. We'll be starting the program in mid-March, but we'll need to know who's attending by the end of February. And we do have an early bird special as well. I've also created a survey. So if you have questions or if there are things that you're concerned about, you really want to make the program work for you, I really want to hear from you. So you can fill in the survey or you can schedule a meeting with me, and that can be done through the website. So thank you very much for attending this presentation. and for being interested in the program and for giving me your feedback. I look forward to hearing from you and to working with you in the future.